ink all over it. You put it down and then you put a page on top of it and it kind of went through, so you got a second copy of it. And then we had this tremendous jump in technology called NCR paper, no carbon required. And it was just, then all of a sudden you didn't even need to put the carbon paper down. I thought that's, technology could never go beyond that.
I know.
You know, and now,
And wear black fingers.
oh man, oh yeah, always, oh, they were a mess to work with, always a mess to work with. But anyway, better than nothing, usually. But what happened, I remember my, when I got into appraisal and really got going in the appraisal, what happened, there were no computers to pull up comparables and everything. What I had to do was go down to 10th and Wadsworth, to the board of directors, that was the Colorado Association of Realtors there. That was the Denver branch, or actually it was the Jefferson County branch then. And they had books down there, and I had to go sit in there and look through the books and find my comparables I'm going to use for my appraisals. And then I started building up my own book supply. We're in my house. I didn't have to go down there, and I was able to do it in my own property, in my own house. I was able to pull up the comparables. And that was just a great jump from having to go down there. Then I got my first computer. And I tell you, this first computer I got, guys, it was what do they call it? That jet, inkjet, whatever you want to call it. And it would do one line, then go back and do the next line. I thought I died and went to heaven. I mean, it was just incredible. And that's what it was back then. And now look what it's doing. I mean, on and on and on, you know. But now the point is, we don't have to have original signatures now until closing. Back then you had to get them right when you wrote a contract on a property, the next day you ran around like a chicken. You ran down the seller, then you ran down the wife and the kids, whoever else. It was terrible. Not now. Everything, you just do it. You can email it. You can do anything you want to do with it. You can scan it. So we don't have to have original signatures until closing. Look at the bottom of this page. This is really cool. This sales files, and what they have, we have this, and then on the top of page 18, what this is so cool. What you want to do is cut and paste this, and on the inside of every one of my files, I actually have it, yeah, right on the inside cover, and I have this list of everything that's inside of that particular deal. And I have a check mark by every one of these things. Let's go down this list. I'll have the lead-based paint disclosure for residential properties built before 1978. Is that true in Colorado?
Yes.
No.
No.
In Colorado, it's a building permit, right? Guys, in every other state, it's any home built before January 1st, 1978 has to have a lead-based paint disclosure. Not in Colorado. It's any property with a building permit that was done before January 1st, 1978. We have to have this lead-based paint disclosure. Boy, again, guaranteed question. You're going to have it. And what is the purpose of this lead-based paint disclosure? It is so, they make a big deal out of this because all it's doing is the seller is saying he has no record of lead-based paint inside of his house. He checks that box, and the buyer says he doesn't want an inspection. It's been 40 years. And so that's essentially what this lead-based paint does. But it's to protect us, to protect the buyer and the seller. But we have to have that lead-based paint disclosure signed before the contract is signed, or that contract is void. One more time. The people have to sign this lead-based paint disclosure before the purchase contract, or that purchase contract is void. Lead-based paint disclosure must be signed before the purchase contract is signed, or that purchase contract is void. never had effect in the first place. That's one way a contract may be void. There's three other ways. What are they?
Statute of frauds.
The statute of frauds is something we'll study.
Aesthetically or
Well,
insane by
let's
jury.
talk about statute of frauds for just a minute. What is statute of frauds? That's where
Everything has to be in writing.
any contract for real property must be in writing or it's void through the statute of frauds. That's not fraud. That's just any contract for real property in Colorado. Any contract for real property must be in writing or it's void through the statute of frauds. So if we sign the contract before the lead-based paint disclosure, that contract is void. If we have a verbal contract for real property through the statute of frauds, it's void.
Insane by a court.
If you're judged insane by a court, like you're criminally insane, it's void. And the big one, you're gonna see separate questions on guaranteed, illegal purpose. Illegal purpose, if it's for an illegal purpose. Let's go through them again. These are a contract may be void. Help me out.
Insane by a court.
Insane by a court.
Statute of frauds.
A verbal contract for real property through the statute of frauds.
Didn't sign the lead-based paint thing.
Signing the contract before the lead-based paint will void that contract.
Illegal.
And illegal purpose. Illegal purpose. Those are the four ways a contract may be void. How are we doing? I can say it again real easy. Let's do it again. Help me out. It's what? A lead-based paint disclosure. If that's that has to be signed before the contract's signed or that contract's void. What else?
Statute
Statute of
fraud.
A verbal contract for real property through the statute of frauds. Now, I can sell my car verbally, I can sell my bicycle verbally, but for real property, it has to be in writing through the statute of frauds. Did you bring your real estate manual with you? Cool, that's what you need, and we're gonna be on page 20-17. Okay, one more time. We have the signing the contract before the lead-based paint will void it. A verbal contract for real property through the statute of frauds is void. Signing the contract before the lead-based paint disclosure is signed makes it void. And illegal purpose. Those are the four ways a contract may be void. Yeah.
So, the Saturday, an offer is put forth, accepted Sunday. Is that an MEC at that point?
I'm sorry, what's that?
An offer is put forth on Saturday, for example, accepted Sunday, buyer seller. Isn't that an MEC at that point?
Can you have something where a contract can be done on Sunday? Can we have legal contracts on
Well, in
Sunday?
other words, you wouldn't even have gone through the paperwork yet. You wouldn't have any disclosure documents at that point in time.
I guess I don't know where you're coming from, but so we do everything on
I
a
think
Sunday?
she's
No, it
saying,
doesn't
like,
matter,
if-
so
so
it's
if-
Tuesday, Wednesday, but an offer is accepted
Yeah.
on the spot.
If an offer is accepted the day after the offer is given,
Uh-huh.
in theory, they wouldn't have time to receive disclosure documents, is what I think she's trying to say.
Yeah, the disclosure documents typically aren't due till 7 days after which we have to do the contract.
So can they accept a contract?
The disclosures are not accepted till 7 days after? Not at all. Not at all. You don't have 7 days. Everybody's
5 days,
different.
3 days, but it's
It
not.
could be the next day. It could be the same day. But what? So I don't see why, so what's the issue?
In other words, you wouldn't even have a turnaround time for the MEC. I mean, you've got all other, for the disclosure documents within that period of time necessarily.
Again, what we do is we have what am I going to get signed right now? The sales contract. What's in that sales contract? All kinds of conditions. Like we're gonna have to what? After the contract's accepted, then we have a certain amount of time to get the title documents accepted, the inspection done. Is that what you mean?
So you're saying in the sales contract, the box is checked. There's a box that says.
There's a box
for
that's,
the, lead-based paint.
the first thing we check is how long do we have to get the seller to accept this contract? That's the first thing, the acceptance date.
Right,
And-
so even if it's within by end of day that day.
That's fine. And so, and we gotta get it done in that time, of course. But see, once we got the sales contract, then we have all these other contingencies, and we got a bunch of them. You know, the inspection contingency, the, whether we can get an insurance on that property. There's some properties you can't get insurance on. The survey getting done, the appraisal getting done, many of the contingencies. And this is all subject to, again, the dates when these are done, and they have to be done by that date, or else that contract, my inspection on this deal I'm working on right now, we did the inspection last Wednesday. The date for everybody agreeing on what they're going to do on the inspection that was part of the inspection is today. And I've got to get this done, and my phone is going nuts because that buyer is saying, where's that inspection form? Because for some reason, the inspector sent it to him, but it didn't get to him. So I sent it yesterday, he didn't get it again. I sent it this morning, he didn't get it again. Good old technology. I hate technology. I'm sorry, but anyway. So that's what's going on. But we got to get, so this is what's going on right now. This is one contingency that's got to be taken care of today, or I got to get what's called an amend extend. What does that mean? It's a certain separate form that the Real Estate Commission has. Colorado's the only one that has it. And it's called an amend extend. It either amends, changes things on the contract, or extends the dates. So I've got to get that taken care of today, or I've got to get an amend extend. And the seller can say, no, I'm not going to extend these dates. Say, fine. We want out of this contract, give my people back his money, back their money. So I mean, this is what we do. So the only real contingency that was concerned about when I wrote the contract was the acceptance date. That's all I really cared about. The rest of them are going to be contingent on these other things happening. That's why we have transaction coordinators, because they're sitting there making sure all these dates are taken care of, because these dates are strictly enforced. These dates mean something.
If they counter, so say that the offer has an acceptance date of the next day, and the seller wants to counter, can they automatically change the acceptance date in their counter, or would they still have to do an amend and extend?
That's a question. You know, right now, as quick as homes sell right now, you want an acceptance like the next day in most instances. And so the people, the next day, the guy's still thinking about it. It might take him another day. Well, that's part of the counter. So he's going to counter it back and give himself a couple more days to answer it.
Okay.
So that's part of the counter. And that counter can have anything in it.
So the lead-based paint disclosure has to be signed before giving an offer?
No. The lead-based paint disclosure doesn't have to be signed before giving an offer. It has to be given to the purchaser before he signs the purchase contract. He's got to know that this home had essentially built before January 1st, 1978, but in reality, in Colorado, had a building permit. So what do I do on every home I list? I go check and see when the building permit was done? No, I don't do that. If the home was built from 1980 back, I automatically will ask for a lead-based paint disclosure. I'm not going to go check and see if they got a building permit on it.
If you're a listing agent, do you just have the seller sign that, and have it ready for whenever you might get an offer?
Perfect,
So it's just
exactly.
ready whenever someone wants to put an offer in?
You better believe it. And that's got to be signed before the purchase contract is signed. And I'll tell you what, most brokers, when I call them up and I say, okay, I'm putting an offer on your place on 2265 Yates, whatever, can you shoot me over the lead-based paint disclosure? You know what they tell me more times than not? Oh, why don't you just pull one up yourself? You know what that tells me? I know who's going to be doing all the work on this deal. I'm working with a real amateur out there. You know, and that they should have had that signed before they signed the listing contract. That should have been the first thing they signed, was this lead-based paint. Because it's a nothing contract. It's a nothing thing. All that the seller just says, I don't know of any lead-based paint. And he signs it. That's essentially all that happens. So, But this lead-based paint is something that people are very concerned about at the Real Estate Commission. We gotta handle it correctly. Also, that same date, asbestos was banned. Asbestos, there's no reporting requirements for asbestos. Asbestos is not man-made. Asbestos is a mineral. You mine asbestos. And there are no reporting requirements for asbestos. It just happens. There were over 3,000 building materials made out of asbestos. And if you look at some of these older houses, I could point out this window here and show you the houses that are essentially asbestos houses. The siding's asbestos, the countertops are asbestos, the linoleum's asbestos. Essentially everything in that house is asbestos, the roof, the siding, everything. The only thing that's not asbestos are the studs in the wall and the nails and the glass. Essentially everything else is made out of asbestos. Do I need an asbestos report? No. People have to know that if you're buying an older house like that, that it's an asbestos house. You gotta know if it was built before 1970 that all the plumbing in that house is lead, made out of lead. We got a lead-based paint disclosure because they're worried about the lead on the walls peeling. How about the water that's flowing through that house? Not only, and even if you pulled out all of the lead pipes in that house and replaced them, which would just be very prohibitive, it would cost you a small fortune. The pipes coming in from the street are lead pipes. So you're going to have lead pipes no matter what on these older houses. You're going to have a ton of asbestos on these older houses. You're going to have a lot of moisture in these older houses. You're going to have a lot of mold in these older houses. But I like older houses. They're quaint. Well, good luck.
You
Good
don't have to
luck.
worry about the asbestos until you demo it, though. If you're selling it for somebody to knock down, they're gonna have a big problem with asbestos.
Oh, I tell you, if you're doing a flip on a property,
Yeah,
and it has asbestos in it, guys, and they change the ceiling or they change something and they pull out a piece as big as one of these tiles up here, 6 square feet or whatever, you have to have someone in there from the county in their moon suits,
Yeah.
and making sure everything's cool. And if you make one mistake that's against code, the minimum fine is $72,000. Do you have a story?
we just bought property over off 29th, and it was a 1930s house that we're, demoing. And so the asbestos company came in with their suits and everything. And then, so we got a clearing for it, and then somebody came back and said, oh no, there's gotta be asbestos. So they made us clear out 5 inches of dirt in the crawl space. And they had to remove
Who's
5
they?
inches of dirt, the state, because the state signs off on it, and trust you, it's thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. So if
Do you know who the
anybody's
company
gonna
is?
buy a house to demo, it's a big deal. So we had to remove 5 inches of dirt under the crawl space
Wow.
before we can even start demo on the house.
Do you know who the company is, by any chance, who did the work?
Yeah, I have it in my email. I know
Tell-
it's Mauricio.
Yeah, talk, because that's what he does.
Used
Do
to
you
work
know
on that.
Mauricio?
Well, anyway,
But
but,
so then the state is the one that comes and signs off on it, so you
Yeah.
have to have, and then if the state comes back and says, you know what, remove all those, whatever it is, then you have to go in and remove it. This house was spotless when we demoed it, spotless, you could eat off the floor of this 1930s house because of that asbestos removal. It's a pain in the rear.
well, not only that, but they're requiring that now for lead-based paint.
Yes,
Just
that's
as
what
much
they said, yeah.
requirements,
If
just
you're
as
even gonna
much.
replace windows for
What do you have to
lead-based
do with
paint,
all the dirt you removed?
they take it in bags, they
Oh,
bag
yeah.
it in these white hazard bags,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't touch it, they have to remove it, they have to put it in the dumpster and take it to the dump.
But they
don't
make you
wanna
remove
touch
it.
though.
Yeah, I don't know why.
They don't let you touch it, but they make you remove it?
Well, no, the
No,
asbestos
no.
company, you have
David
to
did
hire
it.
They
a
have
company
their
to
come and
come.
do it.
It's
hazmat
against the,
suits and everything, oh,
it's
yeah.
against the law to even go in, if we were to go in and rip out, say, a portion of that as owners, we would have been fined that
Yeah.
$7,500 or $75,000.
Jesus Christ.
And it's outrageous. I had a student one time, and I've only met 3 women inspectors. Very rare. And she was an inspector, and she was doing some flips, and she did this one flip where she had 2 $72,000 fines. And she sold this flip, and she said she made a couple bucks, but Even with $272,000 fine, she must have really known what she was doing. And she, like I say, she was an inspector, so she had experience in the business. An interesting lady to talk to when she had to go through this living hell, getting this flip done. And, well, I tell you, it just, you have to be so careful. Anyway, lead-based paint and the asbestos, boy, make sure you know what you're doing. Ignorance is expensive, guys. Ignorance isn't bliss, ignorance is expensive. That's why you're taking this class instead of online. Let's go to the next one. Exclusive right to buy, sell, or agency or open listing agreement and amendments, which would be for the listing broker only. Disclosure of the brokerage relationships, how are we working, agent, transaction, broker, etc. Disclosure of compensation for services and income from affiliated entities. Remember, we can't get a referral fee from anybody unless they're a licensed real estate broker for anything that's part of the transaction itself. But we can get a referral fee from people outside of the transaction, like roofers, painters, landscape people, because they're not a part of the actual deal. So we can get it from them. But again, we need the permission of both parties, buyer and seller, and we have to run that referral fee through our employing broker. Your employing broker will tell you how this has to happen. And you will have deals where you want to get these referral fees. We have our own roofing company here. And if you guys ever give us a referral on a roofing, on any roofs you know about there, come talk to us. We'll give you a very nice referral fee. And that's totally fine. A couple of years ago, one guy gave us 2 referral fees. He gave us 2 roofs, I should say. He made $48,000 on 2 referrals on these 2 deals he gave us. So again, if you have any roofs you know about there, guys, come see us. You see Lauren or myself.
Is it just flat roofs?
This was 2 commercial roofs.
But is that what you do, or both?
We do flat roofs. We do every type of roof. Yeah, and commercial roofs are many times just flat roofs, TPO or whatever. So, but again, if you know of any out there, come see us. Don't just do it or whatever. Or if you're taking any listings on any properties and they need a roof cert or whatever, and you can get a referral fee on these roofs. The roof I'm doing, the inspection that I've got to get done, this guy's lighting me up. I told Lauren to send it to him, hopefully he did, but he's still not lighting me up here. But it needs a new roof, and the guy's out of town, the seller's out of town. This is the one where the seller wouldn't fill out a seller's disclosure that I told you guys about. This is the only time I've ever sold a home where they didn't give me a seller's disclosure. No matter how many deals you have, guys, everyone's different. It just is, and you learn something on everyone. You never stop seeing things you haven't seen before. That's why I thought, well, shoot, he's not going to do anything as far as repairs go, and he's going to work with us on that and get this home inspected, get the roof done, because he's got to do it. Because if my guy buys it and then tries to get a roof done, the insurance is not going to cover it. His insurance will cover it now. So we've got to get this done before closing. Anyway, so that's an example. Disclosure of the source of residential property square footage. How to get the square footage? Remember, we have to have that square footage form. It's a required form on residential properties whenever we have a listing. And how do we measure properties? Above grade finished exterior square footage. That's surprising to some of you. It's above grade finished exterior square footage. We don't count the garages, we don't count the basements. Only above grade finished exterior square footage. And contract to buy and sell, exchange real estate, counter proposals, amendments, attachments, anything that we've used. Current marketing MLS information. How have we come up with a price for this property? The inspection notice. That's what I'm fighting with today. The seller's property disclosure statement. And we talk about this. This is not a required form. It's voluntary. But I always say, I've always taught it, If they won't sign that property disclosure, I'm not taking the listing, and I won't. But I did a sale now without a seller's disclosure. But my great equalizer, my inspector. I called him up and I said, what do you think, Ken? He said, most homeowners' disclosures are a joke. He said the people just put unknown for half of it and whatever. And I said, yeah, you're right. He said, I'm your protector. I've got your bottom line. And Ken, when he does an inspection, he's gonna be here tomorrow, by the way, guys. One of the top inspectors in Colorado. He's in this home 4 or 5 hours, making sure that it is what you think you are buying. Let's keep going. The actual closing instructions, negotiated before the actual date of closing. What do closing instructions do? What's that word? Remember that word? What do closing instructions do?
The parties.
Very good. Engage the parties. They engage the closing entity or the closing agent. They engage the title company for all intents and purposes. That's who closes our deals. So what does this do? What do these closing instructions do? They engage the closing entity or engage the closing agent. You will see that question on the state exam. Let's keep going. Top of the next page. Copy of any power of attorney. The guy calls up and says, I got a funeral on Wednesday, we need to change the closing. Bull. We don't change closing dates. We move heaven and earth never to change a closing date. That's when deals fall apart. So I tell them, do you have a neighbor or a good friend or a family member who can sign for you so we don't have to change this closing date? And he might say, okay, yes, I do have, my neighbor will do it for me. We fill out what's called a power of attorney. And what it does is he gives this neighbor limited power to sign for him. This power of attorney creates an attorney in fact, not an attorney at law. It's a very limited power to get somebody to sign for this person. Power of attorney, attorney in fact, they go hand in hand. Yes, you will have a question or two on the state exam, maybe 3 on the state exam about power of attorneys. And copy of the earnest money check. Signed and dated receipts for the earnest money held by any third-party closing entity. When I give this property to the title company, I get a copy, I get a receipt for that. I get a receipt for that. And then we have the buyer's financial information if there's any owner carry. What are those contracts called that an owner will carry?
Land contract?
Land contract. Installment land contract is not for land, it's just called that. Land contract, installment land contract. Owner will carry, contract for deed. Those are the 4 names. This is where the seller ends up financing the home. It's called a land contract, installment land contract. Owner will carry, contract for deed. All of those mean the same thing. Land contract, installment land contract, owner will carry, contract for deed.
And what happens in that situation? The seller,
This is where the seller sells his property. He's got $200,000. He can put it in the bank at 0.5%, or he can finance the guy who bought the house. He becomes the lender. And the contracts they use are called the land contract, installment land contract, owner will carry, contract for deed. It's called a contract for deed because you're contracting to get the deed at a later date. You don't get your deed until you pay it off. Moving right along. Signed and dated receipts of the earnest money, we got that. Copy earnest money note. Buyer's financial information if there's an owner will carry. Rental or occupancy agreement before the closing date. Don't you ever, ever let the people rent that property before closing, guys. If you do, kiss that deal goodbye. Something will go wrong. I don't let my people go to the property without me, and I am really strict. I tell them right up front, don't you ever even go to that property without me. Something will go wrong. I had this friend call me up, and she said, I found a home I just fell in love with. Would you write the contract for me? I love those kind of phone calls. So I said, you bet. We got together, wrote the contract. A couple weeks later, she said, why don't you meet me out there? I want to measure the walls for my furniture. And I said, perfect, let's do that, and I'll get the inspection done at the same time. And so we did. I remember it was on a Saturday. So we're sitting there measuring, and all of a sudden, the owner shows up out of the clear blue, a single guy. You know, and I said, and then the inspector showed up at the same time. And I wanted to run around with the inspector because I knew the guy pretty good. I hadn't seen him for a couple of years. And when I knew him, he weighed like 600 pounds. He was down to 180 pounds. Didn't even recognize the guy. And so I wanted to walk around with him because he was a good inspector. The Real Estate Commission says never walk around with an inspector. I don't agree. The inspector's going to be in that home 4 hours. I'm not going to walk around with him for 4 hours, but I'll walk around with him for half an hour or 45 minutes. I might learn something. That's another specialty out there. And so I told the owner, I said, why don't you take the other half of the other end of the measuring tape, help her measure the properties, and I'm going to run around with the inspector. So I did, and then I left. Well, the next night she called me up and she said, how do I get out of this contract? And I said, why? She said, well, I went over to the house today and I went a little berserk. I said, what do you mean over there? I told you never go to the house without me. Then I kind of caught myself. I said, okay, calm down. I said, what happened? She said, well, yesterday we were measuring. He asked me to come over today so he could show me how to work the sprinkler system. And she said, and we went out to the driveway and we walked over to the side of the driveway and there was a bunch of dead grass there. And he said, see this dead grass? He said, these neighbors over here are totally nuts. And they think I own it, and I think I own it, so neither one of us water it, we just let it die. But they're not nearly as crazy as the neighbors over here. And she said, I don't want to live next to these crazy neighbors. And I said, so I calmed her down and everything. We ended up closing it. After closing, she found out the owner was nuts. The neighbors were fine.
The other way around.
Oh, yeah, yeah, so you just never know. Anyway. So let's keep going here. Then, the estimated closing costs. How do we estimate closing costs? You remember, write this down if you haven't written it down yet. Talk about it several times. If the loan amount is less than $180,000, not the purchase price, the loan amount is less than $180,000, it's about 3.5% of the loan amount. If it's less than $180,000, the estimated closing costs are about 3.5%. If the loan amount is over $180,000, it's about 3% of the loan amount.
So if less than 180, 3.5, if more than 3?
If it's less than 180,000, estimate the closing costs at about 3.5%. If it's over 180,000, estimate the closing costs at about 3%. Because there's some, you know, your recording fees are going to be the same. It's going to be a smaller percentage. That's why it's a little bit less the higher you go.
The title company actually takes care of giving us those estimates, don't they?
Very good. Yeah, but we give them an estimate, of course. An estimate of what we do when we write up the contract. I'll show you in the contract where we tell them what their down payment's going to be, but that doesn't include their closing costs. That's why we have to estimate their closing costs. We know exactly what their down payment's going to be, but we estimate their closing costs. And when we go through the contracts, we go through that in great detail. And settlement statement for the parties represented. Those of you that just had closings know what a settlement statement is very well. Any side agreements to revise a settlement statement of any kind, if there were anything that went on. Remember I said, what if I gave the seller a $500, just a thank you for the, you know, for just being such great clients and whatever. I have to adjust that closing statement for that. And promissory notes. we have two promissory notes. What if I don't have an actual amount that I'm gonna put down as earnest money? Then I'm gonna give a promissory note, and of course, at the closing, I sign another promissory note that's gonna carry this for the next 30 years, or 15 years, whatever. Promissory note. Closing entity, commission check, remittance, less the earnest money amount of applicable, so the closing entity commission check. Again, that closing, a lady who's closing this, how is she getting paid? Tax reports, this is if you're a broker doing it yourself. Escrow receipts or collection agreements continuing after closing, accounting for the use of advanced retainer fees. Okay, I thought only attorneys could get retainer fees. Can we get retainer fees? You better believe we can. I had a student one time stick her head in the door and said, I just want to come by and say hi. I haven't seen you for a while. I said, great. I said, how are things going out there? She said, it's going so well, I can't even take new clients. Now there's a lady who should be charging a retainer fee. Attorneys do. If attorneys can do it, we sure as heck can. So retainer fees. Now you don't want to do it on your first couple deals, probably, okay? But once you get good and you get a reputation, heck yes, there's a price to pay for them to work with you. You're that good. Okay. 6-column worksheet, we know what that is. A deed, you want a copy of that deed, a copy of the deed of trust. That of course represents the security for the promissory note. Other legal documents if there are any. And then we have the management files. We're not going to go over those because most of you aren't going to be in property management, but those are some to read too if you're going to be going into property management. And again, this is all going to be part of your sales file that you're going to have in that deal. Look on top of page 20-19, administrative matters. What if you're changing employing brokers? What does that take? It takes $50 is all it is. You know, you go to work for this company and you decide after a month or two, you know, that you made a wrong decision. Don't panic. You know, you're going to be talking to a lot of people that we send here in front of you guys. And some of you are thinking, I'm going to go talk to this guy, I'm going to talk to that guy. Some of you were sent here by a brokerage firm. And you're going to go to work for them. Well, you go to work for them, it turns out to be the wrong company. Well, you didn't marry them. You just went to work for them. Until you spend $50 and change companies. Make this business work for you. Don't give up if you go to the wrong company.
Do you have to record that with anybody, or?
Yes, you do. You have to fill out a form for the real estate commission, and it costs $50 because the real estate commission has to know where you're at. Let's look at good funds down here. Good funds. Below the middle of page 19 there. Rule E36 requires that good funds be held and dispersed for closing. Such money is, what are good funds? Highlight this big time. Immediately available for withdrawal as a matter of right. That's the definitive definition of good funds. It's money that is immediately available as a matter of right. I put in an escrow account, I have to be able to get my hands on it today. From the financial institution were deposited. Number 2 is available for such withdrawal as the consequence of an agreement of an institution in which the funds are to be deposited or a financial institution upon which the funds are to be drawn. And the agreement must be for the benefit of the licensee providing the closing services, the listing broker essentially. And these good funds, again, are money I get my hands on immediately. And all contingencies and conditions must be satisfied before any funds may be dispersed. Good funds are required for closing by the Colorado Consumer Protection Act. Highlight that, Colorado Consumer Protection Act. Next paragraph, examples of good funds are cash, wire transfers, telephone transfers between accounts, same bank, cashier's checks, certified checks, teller's checks. And of course, those of you who've taken closings know, keep your fingers there and go back to chapter 19, page 2. 19, page 2. -2, and look at the last sentence on that page. This is the only place in the book it says this. Cash is not considered to be good funds. On the state exam, guys, you see a question where they say, which of the following are not good funds? A would be cash. Cash is considered good funds on the state exam. It's a mistake, but they haven't changed it. So it could be cash, certified funds, cashier's check, or personal check. Which are not considered good funds? The personal check is not considered good funds. Certified funds and cash are considered good funds on the state exam. They haven't corrected that question yet, okay?
Yeah. Can't fix that.
You know, in
Come on, Jim.
our committee, you know, we created all these questions for PSI when they first came into Colorado, like 10 years ago, I don't know how long it's been. We haven't done a thing for 6 years, haven't changed a thing. But nothing's really changed. Very little has, but there's a whole lot of corrections we could do, but nobody's really pressing the issue to get that done. It's a lot of work, a lot of time. Anyway. Now, what do closing instructions do? What's that word? Engage. Write that down below there. Toward the bottom there on page 20-19. Closing instructions engage the closing entity or agent. Let's go to the second paragraph on page 2020. Second paragraph talks about signing settlement statements. The state statute requires the licensee to sign and approve the settlement statement of the party they assist or represent. The settlement statement must also show the name of the employing broker where applicable. The commission recommends that each licensee and supervising broker review the final contract and proposed settlement statement before closing. And the licensee or an alternate who consents to attend a closing on behalf of the absent licensee is responsible for furnishing the proper settlement statement at closing. Even though that lady's doing it for us, we're still responsible for it. And the employing broker is responsible to see that the licensee is competent in such responsibilities. This is your first closing. I'd better be there with you if you're working for me.
Sorry.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good, what you need?
Sorry, we were doing a class, I guess, at 12 or 11:30.
Yes. Oh, you're not supposed to be, you're a presenter?
Yeah. If not, that's fine.
Okay, we're supposed to have one. Let me check. Let's take a break, guys. Okay, guys, let's look at this second paragraph again on page 20-20. Signing the settlement statements. Let me say that again, I didn't have this on. Okay, let's go to page 20-20, second paragraph, signing the settlement statement. Rule, the state statute actually requires the licensee to sign and approve the settlement statement of the party they assist or represent. The settlement statement must also show the name of the employing broker where applicable. The commission recommends that each licensee and supervising broker review the final contract and propose settlement statement before the closing. We're supposed to have these 3 days before closing, remember that? If they don't have it 3 days before closing, they have to stretch it out until there is 3 days before closing. And they don't. They just haven't been doing that. Every closing I've had this year, this happened on October 3rd, 2015, so it's been over 2 years now. And every closing I've had, you don't get the closing statements till right at closing, just like it's always been. But it's supposed to be 3 days before. I don't care, it's not my responsibility when I get the closing statement. it's their liability to make sure that it gets done 3 days before, and it's just not getting done. As long as people know and they're happy, then I'm happy, and so far, we've been able to get the deals closed, so let's keep going here. And the licensee or an alternate who consents to attend a closing on behalf of the absent licensee is responsible for furnishing a proper settlement statement at closing. Remember, we don't fill out that settlement statement anymore. That closing lady does, but we're still responsible for it. If you haven't had closing yet, you don't know what I'm talking about. You will, soon enough. The employing broker is responsible to see that the licensee is competent in such responsibilities, and a copy of the signed settlement statement shall be delivered to the employing broker immediately after the closing. Let's talk about this. So your employing broker can't go to the closing with you, so somebody else goes. How soon do you have to get that documentation to your employing broker? Immediately. You're going to have that question. Easy answer, immediate, whatever that means to you, immediately. Original signatures are no longer required for the broker's transaction file. Remember, we don't have to have original signatures until closing, but now we don't even need those for our files. Let's go to the middle of page 21. Private bank account insurance. Let's look at this. Brokers may be able to purchase private mortgage coverage for all escrow and operating checking accounts with a deposit in excess of the FDIC coverage as added protection from a bank failure. If you have over $250,000, you're in really good shape, let's face it. You're doing a ton of business, and you don't have to buy extra insurance, just open up a different account, probably with a different lender. I may have told you guys the story about this company that I know of. The guy really isn't a friend of mine, more of an acquaintance, but he's got a good-sized property management company, and what happened is he had $375,000 in his escrow account, and he was actually able to get a line of credit against that escrow account. You wonder why we're having all this trouble with lending. Can you imagine making a line of credit against an escrow account? If he quits making payments, they can't foreclose on him. They can't touch that money. Stupid thing. And yeah, it was a federally insured bank actually did that. So, continuing, computer forms. Several questions on the state exam in this paragraph. Several. We cover a number of them. Most of all these that I'm telling you to put a star by, we cover in other parts of the course. These are several that we do also. Personal computers may be used to generate standard approved forms if the following requirements are met. Number one, the commission approved language must be exactly reproduced. In other words, if we're recopying the contract, it has to be exactly reproduced, word for word, exactly reproduced. The software must not allow alterations of the approved standard language in day-to-day operations, and the software must produce fill-in and allowable transaction-specific language. Now, in my appraisals, many times I would have verbiage that I would have in every appraisal, and that's fine. You cannot do that with real estate contracts. It has to be transaction specific. Expect to see that question on the state exam. It has to be transaction specific language. Everybody understand what I mean by that?
Not really.
Like in my appraisal, I would have that statement that I mentioned to you guys where remember, if the personal property is part of the collateral, then it can't be sold to the secondary market. So I would have that explanation in the appraisal that the refrigerator, stove, and dishwasher should not be considered as personal property. Because if the people replace it, they're going to replace it with something better. If anything, And so because of that, they should still be able to sell that loan to the secondary market. Well, that was something I had in every appraisal, blam, 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 blam. In a contract for real estate, I cannot do that. I cannot have something that I'm gonna put in every contract. It has to be transaction specific to that one deal. I'm glad we spent some time on that, because you're gonna see a question or two about that. Transaction specific. And in a font clearly differentiated from the standard approved contract language. In other words, we have to have everything that goes in the line has to look different than the rest of the contract. How are you gonna make it look the same? That'd be the tough part. It's gonna look different. How are you gonna make it look the same? You know what I mean? But it has to be in differentiated print. That's the word. It's not in italics, it's not in in abbreviations. It's in, again, it has to be, again, differentiated print. It has to be look different than the rest of the contract. Remember these words, guys. Transaction specific language, differentiated print, exactly reproduced, and number 4, contract print must be easily readable. Draw a line down to the open space down there. Instead of readable, what word should go there? Those of you who've had it.
Legible?
Legible. Very good. It has to be legible, not readable, legible. Do all my contracts have to be typed? No, no. Can I have it partially typed and partially handwritten?
Yeah.
Yes, I can.
If
I-
you handwrite a contract, do you have to memorize then all 17 pages of that approved contract in order for it to be valid?
If you had to reproduce it,
Yeah.
retype the whole thing?
Well, like when you say that contracts can be handwritten,
Oh.
if you forget like a section, like say you're doing a listing contract,
Yeah.
and you forget a section that's on like page 7, is that contract voidable because you missed something if you handwrote it?
Depends what you missed, guys. You know, and you did, you know, you went through and you missed a whole page, and the people signed it. You know, then you go back and make copies of it, and you go, son of a gun, I missed that. What do? You go back and have them do it over, it's no big deal. You know, and again, you let the people know, you know, you're professional, you want to be as professional as you can be, and that's not a good one. That's not a good mistake to make. But can I have it partially handwritten, partially typed? Of course I can. And that's what happens. We got a 17-page monster that we work with. And sometimes I'm going over with my people, and I notice that there's a couple spaces that I didn't fill in. I can just fill them right in. They don't have to initial it, nothing. As long as it's legible, readable. Now, like again, back in the day, guys, everything was handwritten. Everything. I'll tell you what, appraisals, when I first got into appraising, when I first got approved for FHA appraisals, appraisals could be done in pencil. Seriously, seriously. Things have changed a whole lot since the old days, I'll tell you. I can't tell you how many contracts I've written on the hood of my car or on my steering wheel. You bet, that's how you did in the old days. If you ever turned in a typewritten contract, they looked at you like you were crazy. You know? You carrying around a typewriter with you? Pretty crazy. Anyway. I went into an office the other day. Very up-to-date office. It was especially for this. They worked with the city of Arvada, in Old Town Arvada. I walk in there, and here's all the secretaries in there. They're using signature typewriters. Blew me away. It was refreshing. I thought it was great. I thought, man, that's fantastic. As I walk in there, I hear all this typing going on. I thought, boy, I haven't heard that in ages. Yeah, sure enough, they were using signature typewriters. So, most of you don't even know what I'm talking about. That's okay. That's okay. Now, how about this next part? Blank spaces shall not be filled in by licensee before you see the people. How much can you fill in? Really? You don't know how they want to take title. Outside of the address, that's about all you get. And the date. You know, everything else you're going to have to do while you're in front of the people, right? Okay. Software resources. Now these are the cheap ones right here that they have right here. You can spend thousands on these. You guys are going to be taking Community Association managers licenses, and I hope you all do. Now the software for Community Association manager, that homeowner association, they have software that runs about $20,000 for this software. And they need that. The bigger the association, the more they need. And then commission audits, we don't have to worry about that. Let's go to property management records, really don't need to know that. Let's do this. Let's go over to, I really like this page, office policy manuals. Remember, we talked about this several times during the course.
Which page is it?
On page 20-34. It's right after 20-33.
And before 2035.
Yes.
Super.
Any other questions? Now, this office policy manual, what do you know about it so far? Those of you who've talked about it before, tell me about it. Okay, I'll tell you about it. Okay. First of all, every company has to have one. Your employing broker has to have an office policy manual. And the purpose of the office policy manual, write this down, guarantee question. It's not part of the list here really. How this office works with the public. How this office works with the public. That's the main purpose of an office policy manual. Every company has one, and you should read it and sign it and have a copy of it. And make sure you know what you're getting into before you go to work for that company. My office policy manual is probably 7 pages, double-spaced. You can read it in 20 minutes. A 4th grader can understand it. There's no mystery. But I've seen some of these crazy office policy manuals that are like a phone book. The broker you're going to work for doesn't know what's in that sucker, let alone you. So again, be careful. Be careful when you read these office policy manuals. Make sure you know what it's saying. And what should be in it? Let's read this paragraph on top
Wait,
of
what
page
was on the test?
34.
Main purpose was, I missed
Oh,
that.
the main purpose in office policy manual is to show how that office is working with the public. To show how that office is working with the public. Agent, transaction broker, things like this.
Excuse me.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Let's go to top paragraph there on page 34. Commission rules E29 through E32 require brokers to demonstrate, there's my least favorite word, reasonable supervision. It's so nondescript, it doesn't say anything. And when I'm supervising my brokers, hopefully I'm correctly defining reasonable, and a judge isn't doing it for me. I hate reasonable, but to demonstrate reasonable supervision over all licensees and non-licensed employees, including but not limited to secretaries, bookkeepers, and personal assistants of licensed employees. To comply with these supervision rules, brokers who employ others are required to establish an office policy manual. This is in addition to the requirements for a written brokerage relationship policy. A policy to protect confidential information. These are Rule E39, E39. The destination, the designated brokerage relationship, Rule E38, whether performing sales or management activities. And the following special guidelines as applicable are suggested for office policy manuals. When I did my office policy manual, I went through every one of these step by step by step. I included the management activity. We're not going to go over those today because most of you, again, won't be in property management. But there's several other places in the book where they go over what should be in this office policy manual. And you, as employing brokers 2 years from now, or as independent brokers having your own shop, should definitely look over these lists. You're going to have this manual until you lose it or you throw it out accidentally, whatever. This manual's going to be good for years, guys. They don't change it every year. I know you got a blue one. That's what, 3 years old, something like that? Which is fine. And that's a good one. That's fine. That's word for word what we do today, isn't it? Word for word. So this manual, you don't have to replace it every year. You ever want to replace, come see me.
Yeah.
You know, you're an ex-student.
The ones in your videos, especially for contracts, I think like 2014 and 2015,
Probably are.
and you
Yeah.
go to the exact same stuff.
Yeah, it's the exact same stuff. And I record those contracts, you know, as soon as January hits, I go over the contracts immediately so I can sell them as continuing ed. But they're the same. They're the same. They don't change those contracts that often. One time they went 9 years without changing the sales contract. So let's go to these sales transactions. Look at these. What has to be in here or should be in here? The parties responsible for delegated duty agreements. Duties and agreements. Preparation and review of contracts prior to closing. How does your broker handle review of your contracts? Are you going to look over my contract? Are you going to help me write them? And his answer better be, you better believe it, and I'm not going to let him get out of here until I'm satisfied with them. Or he may have a mentor to train you, and that mentor better be helping you fill these out. Because even though we go over these in class, guys, you're not going to walk out of here knowing how to do those. It takes several of them. They're a monster, really are a monster to learn how to do them. Handling earnest money deposits, disputes, releases. Like when I first became a broker and I was stupid enough to keep that deposit, you know? One mistake I've never made since, so. Backup contracts, how do we handle backup contracts? If I got a solid contract on this property, I'm not gonna take backups. I'm gonna tell people, tell my office, tell them we're not taking backups on this property. Now, if I call them up and I say, is this property on such and such still available? And they'll say, no, it's under contract, but we're taking backups. I'll show it all day long, you bet. How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good. Long time no see.
I know, I came to brush up.
Good, good, good. We're just finishing up trust accounts on page 30-24. 34, excuse me. Aren't you about done with your finals, or have you started yet?
Oh, I finished.
You didn't? I
I'm
thought
already
so.
working for Keller Williams, but I haven't passed my exam yet.
Okay, okay. Well, let's talk after the class, okay? So, in the backup contracts, I'll say, yes, we have a contract, but we're taking backups. What does that mean? What do you think some would happen where I'm taking backups on a contract?
Something fall through, contract? or-
Not fill through, no,
Or
but I have
decided-
contingencies that make it a weak contract. What kind of contingency would make it a weak contract? Pardon me?
No earnest money, or that's a.
No earnest money would be one, but I'm not gonna, I don't even have a contract without the earnest money, but that'd be one, or not enough earnest money, maybe.
Contingency, I'm saying.
Perfect. They have a home to sell. You know, and son of a gun, they got a home to sell and it's not selling, and I can't sell this house, have a contract until they sell that contract. I'm gonna have what? A right of first refusal on that. Let's talk about this. I'm going to say, folks, I'm gonna write a contract on your property or I'll accept it. You come to me. I have the listing and you come to me and this is a good solid contract except they have a home to sell. And it's, you know, it's a high-end home. If it's over $600,000, guys, it's not gonna sell in the morning. You know, it's gonna be on the market a while. And I'm gonna say, okay, you've gotta sell this house. Well, what I'm gonna do is this. I'm going to say, yes, I'll give you until, you know, let's say today. Today is October 7th, November 7th. I'll give you 6 months. I'll give you till May 7th to sell that house. In the meantime, if I get an offer that I can close sooner than that, I'm going to come to you with a right of first refusal and say you've got 3 days to get rid of that contingency to sell your house, and if you can't get rid of that contingency, then I'm going to accept this other offer. Everybody see that trail there? I want that contract with him selling the house, at least it's something, and especially in this market, he's probably going to sell it in 6 months and close it, probably before that. But if I get a good solid contract, I'll give them the opportunity of making it due within a few days. If you can't do it, I'll give you back your deposit, but it's a right of first refusal, and I will take contracts, backup contracts, because the one I have is not real strong. Closing in documents and closing instructions for the broker's agent. How do we handle closings? You better make sure, ask them, not only are you helping me with my contracts, am I gonna have somebody there for my first few closings? After 3-4 closings, you don't need anybody, you really don't. The closings are gravy, especially after you take closings class here. But your first few closings, you're gonna kind of feel intimidated, and you really don't know what to expect, so they better be there with you. Maintenance, custody of contract files. Who takes them? Who handles the files? Remember, the employing broker has to have a copy, and so do you. They passed that about a year ago. It used to be the associate broker didn't have to keep records. Now you do. Escrow records and written procedures for handling business operations. Again, how do we handle escrows, etc.? Fair housing. Fair housing is so important. You've got to make sure that you're treating everybody the same. And I'll tell you what, if you see somebody in your company, when somebody in there makes some crass remark or tell some joke that you find offensive, see, well, I'm not going to go tell the broker. I'm not a squealer. Guys, this is fair housing. You better go tell that broker about this. He needs to know. Let him make the decision. He cannot make an informed decision about that broker unless he knows this. Is he going to tell that same joke to the listing he has tomorrow night? Or to the buyer he's working on? Where they think something discriminatory is funny now? Well, I tell you what, guys, take fair housing very, very seriously. Colorado is known as a strong fair housing state. We have more protected classes than anybody. We take great pride in not being prejudiced in Colorado. But there's still idiots out there. More and more moving here every day. No offense. And then we have staff training, dissemination of information, staff meetings, use of personal assistants. Remember, in Colorado, we can have an unlicensed personal assistant. Guaranteed buyouts. Can I have a listing where I guarantee to buy the property afterwards? Yeah. Yeah, you're working for me, you can do that, but if you want to buy it yourself, or work with me and we'll work out a buyout for it. Investor purchases, how to work with investors. And again, they're tougher to get through, loans are tougher. Everything changes when you're working with investor deals. Non-qualifying assumptions, no such thing anymore. When did that end? 1990, so we haven't had them for, man, going on 30 years. And licensees purchase and sale of property. How do you handle it? If you're selling your own house? If you're selling your own house or you're purchasing a house, some brokers that you go to work for will want to get their regular cut on that deal if they have one. Make sure you get that squared away. Listing procedures and release of listings. You know, I have this listing and this guy wants out of it. These people want out of this listing. How does that handle? Remember, a contract, you can't get out of it unless both parties agree. What's another way you get out of it? Several different ways. Destruction of the properties, death of one of the parties, right? All of these are ways you can get out of a listing contract. Or the seller can come and say that I abandoned them. And they're the ones who determine abandonment. This is a way that your seller can get out of any listing that he has with you. When you go through the listing contract, you don't point that out. I mean, you go over it, you kind of skim over it, okay? You don't point it out and say, man, when you want to get out of this contract, if I upset you, just say this, and don't do that. You really don't want to do that, okay? But you let them know, you know, you go over it, just like it's part of the rest of the contract. But again, there's many ways they can get out of this contract with us. Not too many ways we can get out of it with them. And usually when a guy calls up and they, or a lady, whatever, and they want to get out of that contract, you know what? Usually sick of them too. They've been calling you 5, 6 times a day, and they're just some people that drive you crazy. Say, fine, I'll let you out of it, no problem. I got $100 invested, I'll kiss the 100 you'll buy, just get you out of my life. Yeah.
Can you fire a client if you want to?
Not really, not really, unless they want to get fired. Because again, a contract is irrevocable. Irrevocable. Now, they have ways they can fire you, but you really don't have a way you can fire them. So, and the best way they can get rid of you, of course, is saying that you abandoned them. What do you mean by abandoned? Well, I called you yesterday, you didn't return my call. It could be any reason or no reason, really. And who defines abandonment? The client.
Does it have to be specified in the contract what their terms of abandonment are?
Yeah, it's already in the contract. No, it just says abandonment. It doesn't say what the terms are, and this is what abandonment means. The client can define abandonment. Like I say, any piddly little thing. You know, they said they were going to drop something by last night, and they didn't show up. Whatever. They want to get out of this contract, they can get out of it pretty easily if they want to. Now, you know when I use this? When I have a seller who has a contract and the broker's an idiot. I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say that. The broker doesn't know what he's doing or she's doing. Okay, and he doesn't like her. They don't like him. They'll say, how can I get out of this contract? I'll show them. Heck yes, I will. You bet. Yeah, and again, say abandonment. It's right in the contract, guys. When we go over that in a couple of weeks, you'll know what I'm talking about. Your broker will help you with that. Rental occupancy before closing. Remember, yesterday we talked about this. Don't you ever let somebody rent that property before closing. If they do, kiss that deal goodbye. Something will go wrong. No two ways about it. Computer systems, data control, backups, physical security, all that technical BS stuff, you know. How is that all handled? And internal audit and supervisory reviews of business operations. Again, all of this is handled. This is about all you need in your manual, but write this down underneath there, 3-16 and 2-30. Remember, this is in the trust account or business escrow records chapter. And just remember this page for office policy manuals. And these are 2 other pages. Let's just kind of glance at these. Let's go to page 3-16. And here it is. Commission position on office policy manuals. Here's other things that you should have in your office policy manual. So when you're preparing your office policy manual, pretty cool. You've got other information the Real Estate Commission says you should have in there. Then also go back to 20-34 and write in 2-30. Let's go to page 2-30. 2-30, top of the page, office policy relationship policy must be written. Again, office policy manuals always have to be written, and again, these are things you should have in your office policy manual. So this office policy manual, again, mine's 7-8 pages, double spaced. It doesn't have to be a book. It can be very readable, very understandable. Let's go back to page 20-34. The management activities, don't worry about that. If you're going to be a property manager, you can look that over. And we covered this many times on page 36. Let's cover it again. Page 20-36, where if I'm dividing this property, I'm subdividing it into 20 or more individual units for condominiums, co-ops, or timeshares. Condominiums, co-ops, or timeshares. and there's 20 or more units, I have to have it registered with the Real Estate Commission before I can even start developing. One more time, 20 or more units
This is
of condominiums, co-ops, or timeshares. It does not include residential. It does not include 1 to 4 family units. 1 to 4 family units are what's considered residential. It does not include residential, and it does not include, look at the top of page 37, second line, campgrounds. So there's 2 exceptions to this. So it does not include condominiums, cooperatives, or timeshares. What the heck's a condo? Help me out. I'm brand new. I haven't.
It's an air lot.
What the heck's that mean?
Means that you own your internal airspace, but you don't own your exterior walls or the building or the land. Everyone owns it with their common.
With the tenancy
Tenancy
and
and
common?
Tenancy
That's
and
pretty
common
darn
with,
good.
Undivided
With
interest.
an undivided interest.
Yeah, let's do it again. That's pretty darn good. What is a condominium? It's an air lot. You own the interior airspace. You do not own the exterior walls, and you don't own the land, you don't own the clubhouse, tennis court, swimming pool. But everybody in the whole place owns all of the exterior walls, and all of the land, and all of the swimming pools, tennis courts, clubhouse, as tenants in common with an undivided interest. That's how a condominium works. Any questions about that? And we covered this, guys, many times, okay? We'll be covering this again. Now, what the heck's a co-op then? Cooperative.
That's where you own shares. Is that
On
right?
what? But how do you know, how do you suspect it's a co-op though?
More than one person on shares.
Owned by a
Well, no,
corporation.
you have a condo building, okay? But instead of buying individual condos, it's owned by a corporation. And you buy stock in that corporation equal to the value of those units. So you don't get a deed because you're not buying real property, you're buying stock. And you don't get a deed, you get a proprietary lease. So again, it does not count for residential, 1 to 4 family units, or membership in campgrounds. An example of a campground would be like an RV lot that you're gonna put an RV parking or
What
something
about
on.
trailer parks? Is that considered campground?
And trailer parts too would be considered. Now, most, in Colorado anyway, of course, virtually all mobile home parks are leased property, they're not purchased. There's only, Monticello is the only one left over in Federal Heights. If you guys don't know where that is, in Federal Heights, that's where there's probably 100,000, literally, mobile homes over there. Now, I'll tell you what, not a bad market, guys. I know of one guy, an ex-student, in fact, he was doing this while that's why he got his broker's license, is you can sell these mobile homes, you don't need a license because they're leasing the ground. And he was selling these mobile homes. He was doing really well, really well. There's a demand for those right now, and he was making like 10% on these. You know, so 30, 40, 50,000 bucks. And he gets both ends of the deal. It was a pretty sweet deal. He was doing real well. Still doing it. I talked to him a couple weeks ago. He got them because of some mobile homes, of course, you do own the land, and you have to be licensed in that case. Like I say, Monticello over there is one of them. Okay, let's do this. Get out your big 3-ring binder. Your big 3-ring binder. And go to your second to last section. That's your trust account section. And go to the last few pages. You got a 25 question quiz. Again, it should be in your second to last section there, record keeping and trust accounts. Right, if you go to current legal issues, you've gone too far. Pardon me?
I just noticed there's another contract in there.
Beyond contracts, the one beyond contracts, and then you have closings, the one beyond closings. And right at the very end, there's a 25-question quiz. We'll do this together. Everybody there?
No.
Okay, go to the second, go to trust account, go to current legal issues. The very last one, and then go back a page or two. Go to the very last one. Everybody there? Where it says current legal issues? And then just go right where it starts, current legal issues, and then just go back a few pages and you're there. What color is that current legal issue?
Green.
Is it green? Okay. If you go to the green, go back a few pages and you're there. 25-question quiz. Anybody not have it? You should have it.
This one here?
Yes, that's it. Go just a few pages before that. Yeah, it should be right before that.
There you go.
You're cool. Everybody else there? Okay, guys, you always need your name tents out too. And they're not just for me, they're for everybody. I'll get you another one. Let me get one for you right now. Okay. Who else needs one?
Do you want these names?
If you like blue,
You just told me number one.
What is it?
I know, I remember that one.
What's he on?
We've done 3 so far. Another one back there. And then after we pass all 3.
okay, guys. We're gonna do this one together. Everybody there?
You can take it in too, that's fine.
Let's do number 1. Here we go. As long as proper standards are met, trust account records may be kept in any medium except C, the downtown office of the CPA. I told you that one. Gave you that one's a freebie. Number 2, real estate license law does not, the N word, does not include a provision that A, individual assistants for agents and for accounting must be licensed. We may have an unlicensed assistant in Colorado. Now, if you want to hide something in a contract, you don't put it in little print down at the bottom. Everybody reads that. If you want to hide something in a contract, you put it in big print right in the middle. And what happens, people get there and subconsciously you go, well, they're not hiding anything here, and you tend to skip right over it. That's why they do this. Let's read the second question again. Real estate license law does not, and say, ooh, not, we're looking for something that's not true. Say that again, the not word. All of the following are true except, we're looking for the exception. Read those questions like that, guys, or else your mind tends to skip right over those, and you're probably gonna answer the first one that's wrong, okay? So number 2, the answer is A, individual assistants again. Must be licensed? No, they don't. We can't have unlicensed assistants. Number 3, to account for money belonging to others, the broker need not, the N word, need not maintain. We don't have to have weekly notifications. We only have to have monthly notifications, and then only if money has changed hands on that account. If money hasn't changed hands, we don't even have to report it monthly. But no matter what, we never have to report it weekly. Let's keep going. So D-dog on 3. Number 4, trust escrow accounts may not, the N word, may not be maintained in a credit union. A credit union. You will see that one again. Don't miss it. Number 5, commission rules do not allow what do you think? How about C, the mixing of company accounts and security deposits until separate accounts can be opened? No, that's commingling. Those accounts have to be separate. Other people's money have to be individually separate. Remember, when you buy a house, guys, typically what that lender's gonna require of you is an escrow account for your taxes, 3 months' worth, for your insurance, 3 months' worth, your homeowners association, 3 months' worth, your mortgage insurance premium, 3 months' worth. So every bank has, just for you, little old me, 4 separate escrow accounts, and every month when I make my payment, they throw the proper amount into each one of those accounts, and they do that thousands of times for people who have accounts with that bank. Okay. So the answer to 5 is C. How about 6? The mixing of funds from separate trust accounts is commingling.
And D.
And also D, yes. Brokerage bank account identification does not, the N word, does not require D-Dog. We don't have to have the name of the office assistant allowed to access the account. Okay, let's go to number 8. The cash balance for an escrow accounts are maintained on the cash balance, cash basis. Cash and accrual are the 2 ways we use cash basis accounting. Number 9, the commission does not allow that money that's in that escrow account. I just can't go pull it out whenever I want to. The answer is C. Retrieval of those contributed funds by the broker at will? No, I can't pull it out until I need to get it out. So C is the answer. How about number 10? After a sale closes, any balance in the buyer's ledger should first be
Used for the party.
returned to their last known address. And what if it comes back and they say address unknown or no, whatever here? Remember, we sent it out again and again and again. No matter what, I can never hold that money for more than 5 years. And if it's going up to 5 years, and 5 years is approaching, what do? I turn it into the Great Colorado Payback Fund. I put it in the state escrow fund. The deal fell apart. I'm sitting in my office. What are the 3 things I can do with that money? Remember, everybody's upset with everybody. I can't give it to either party or I'll get sued by the other one.
You can hold it for 120 days.
I can wait 120 days if nobody tells me what to do. I can just give it back to the buyer.
Await arbitration.
I can await
Mediation.
mediation first. Mediation, and if mediation doesn't happen, then arbitration, then litigation. I can await proceedings. Mediation, arbitration, litigation. What's the third one?
Interplead the court.
Interplead. Remember that word, interplead, to the courts. I can await proceedings, mediation, arbitration, litigation. I can interplead to the courts, let the courts decide what to do, or I can wait 120 days. If nobody tells me what to do, I can give it back to the buyer and not worry about it. Okay. Number 11, proper handling of closed files includes, scratch out does not, just scratch out does not, it should be includes, and the answer is B, boy. Storage of each licensed activity for 4 years. We have 4 years, we have to keep everything for 4 years, so it does include that. Number 12, an earnest money personal check must be B-boy deposited in the broker's trust account by the 3rd business day after receiving notice of contract acceptance. 3 business days after notification of acceptance. How much for a property manager? 5 business days from receipt. Okay. So 12 is B-boy. 13. Which of the following documents must have an original signature in the broker's closing file? And this is the file that you bring to closing. I hate this question, but they like it on the state exam. This is the file you're bringing to closing. The only The only original signature you're probably going to have is the power of attorney. Remember all those other signatures I should say, we don't get until closing. 14, so the answer is D-Dog on 13. On 14, a document that need not be in the seller's listing broker's closing file is, and this would not be a buyer's agency agreement. The buyer's agency agreement, that's only up to the buyer's broker. The seller's broker, it's none of his business. Any more than it's any of our business what's in that listing file. We're the buyer's broker. It's none of our business what's in that listing file. So A on 14. 15. A document that need not be in, oh, we got that already. That's a deed of trust. Or did we get that? No, we didn't. Okay, yeah.
What's a
On this,
cooperating broker?
pardon me?
What's a cooperating broker?
Remember, the co-oping broker or cooperating broker, that's the buyer's broker. I'm the listing broker. You bring in the buyer, you're the co-oping broker or cooperating broker, is what that's called.
You said it was the buyer's broker?
The buyer's broker is the co-oping broker. Remember, there's the listing broker who has the listing. Man, oh man, that brings back memories. Anyway.
She's not happy.
Oh man, I think she's laughing. I don't know. It probably is. I raised 4 girls. It sounds just like that. Okay.
That was C?
On that one, yes, that's C. Now, and of course on, let's go over 15 again.
Wait, why does it have to be in there?
What?
The deed of trust, because the deed of trust is this security.
This is the deed of trust to the lender. I don't like this question at all. It's not wrong, it's just not a good question, not well written at all. There's not enough information here to really answer it. A document that need not be in the cooperating broker's file, the buyer's closing file, is the deed of trust. Well, it kind of does have to be in there if he has all the figures, all the paperwork that he signed, because the closing statement has to be signed by them. So anyway, guys, if you see this one, that's the answer. You probably won't see it again, but if you do, that's it. Computer-generated real estate contracts forms must, and again, remember we talked about this 20 minutes ago. C, exactly produce the standard language. What type of trust account would a licensed property manager not have? And it's a property manager, so you probably wouldn't have D-Dog, the owner's sales escrow account. Without a separate agreement, a licensed property manager must report an expense paid on May 3rd. There's one question in the book about this that references this stupid question. And I say it's stupid because it's something you don't need to remember, really, unless you're a property manager. And this is something where, without a separate agreement, a licensed property manager must report an expense paid on any date by the end of the month following the date it was paid. So May 3rd would be the end of June, right? It would be on June 30th. If you'd got it on June 3rd, it'd be July 31st. It'd be the last day of the month following the date that you got it. Again, you probably won't see this one again. Not a great question. How about 19? The chronological record of earnest money deposits and withdrawals transactions is called a journal. Good. B-boy. A separate escrow accounting card for each property transaction would be each of the following except, it'd be D, a list of escrow instructions. It would not be that. It could be any of the other 3. And 21. Bank account reconciliation of the bank statement, journal, and ledgers must occur, and D-Dog, monthly, whenever there is any bank activity. 22, the broker for a collapsed corporation must Still keep records for 4 years. D-Dog. 23, when a corporate broker changes jobs, they must, D-Dog, again, keep all the records for 4 years, even if you change jobs. 24, brokerage commission fees are best determined by the contract, of course, the contract. Contractual agreements. B-boy. And the party who would hold security deposits for property.
We don't have to.
We've had 25, that's right, she has to add that, okay.
But it's B.
But it's gonna be B, yes, okay.
Good to ask.
Now, if you miss 7 or more, you flunked. And if you flunked this, we gotta have a talk, okay? Anyway, guys, we are done with trust accounts. Trust accounts. So, again, a lot of information today, a lot of good information for the state exam and good information for when you become an employing broker or independent broker. Are there any questions about anything before we call it a day?
This is unrelated, but on those 4 tests that we have, the 4 practice ones that are 74 questions,
Yes.
what do you need to get on those percentage-wise to consider pass?
Oh, okay, good question here, guys. The 74 questions we have for the Colorado portion, that's the database for the Colorado exam, guys. If you flunk the Colorado state exam, you have nobody to blame but yourself. I gave you all the answers. All the answers are there in those 4 74 questions. Know those very, very well. And again, you don't need to really, well, on the state exam, you only need to get a 70%. So you can do the math, figure it out. On the national portion, you have 80 questions that count, and you have to get a 75%. So you can miss 20 and still pass.
Okay, so those are the ones that we keep, but we just show Jen that we did it.
Yes, on 74, you don't grade them because you have all the answers there.
Yeah.
So the answers are there and why that's the answer. And get those 74s down really well, guys.
Jim, I thought it was a 75% for the state exam.
No, the state is only 70%.
How many questions?
There's 74.
Yeah, one's like 69.
Now, and if it's the national portion, you have to get a 75%. So you can miss 20 and still pass.
The national.
Yeah. What number? What's that?
How many questions? On the national?
On the national, there's 75, and you have to get a 75% to pass it. So, okay. Any other questions about anything? Doesn't have to be. We never have to stay on topic, guys. We can jump around anywhere you want to. And if there aren't any more questions, I will catch you all tomorrow. Whose last day is it today? Just one again. Well, okay, guys. Catch you in the morning.
What's tomorrow?